Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Bishop Talk. This is Robert Griffin, and I'm thanking you for taking time out to join me today for the next segment of many episodes we've been doing around the Bishop Talk dialogue here. And today, I am very honored and pleased and happy to have a very longtime friend and colleague, Reverend Dr. Rebecca Voelkel. I think we've known each other, I'm going to say close to 20 plus years, if not longer, that we have crossed paths in the ministry work here and there. So thank you, Rebecca, for taking time to be with me today. And just by way of introduction to get people to know a little bit about you, why don't you do a bit of a self-introduction? I know you're up in Minneapolis, so maybe we'll know how the weather is in Minneapolis.
Well, thank you, Bishop Robert. Yeah, I think it has been 20 years. And I don't know, particularly in this moment, I am deeply grateful for the opportunity to kind of lean into relationships and long time sort of co-conspiracy. And so I deeply appreciate the invitation. Yes, I am up in Minneapolis, and as true to form for spring in Minneapolis, it's like 30 degrees today, and it'll be 70 degrees on Friday. I am one of the pastors at Lyndale United Church of Christ, where I am the pastor for Justice Ministries and direct the Center for Sustainable Justice, which works is kind of tries to help the kind of work within the church around justice issues and seeks to help the church work in multi-faith ways around the intersection of particularly racial and LGBTQ justice, and climate justice. So that's kind of the sacred trouble that I make up here in the Twin Cities. And I also work as an adjunct at United Theological Seminary of the Twin Cities.
Oh, well, congratulations. I don't think I knew about that last tidbit. Well done.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Well, Dr. Voelkel, as long as I've known you, your work has often seemed like it had centered around interfaith work, interreligious work. You kind of have always just crossed the denominational lines here and there to do work, both kind of inside and outside the church. How has that work been for you over the years?
Mm. You know, the first thing that comes to my mind is maybe a conversation that took place um in an ecumenical gathering that we were both a part of. But I think we were all reflecting on the fact that particularly doing work around LGBTQ justice, um, that the reality, particularly 25 years ago, the reality that some of our co-religionists, like my fellow UCCers, not so much in MCC, but, were pretty humorless and homo haters and um, practiced perhaps a distorted understanding of in my case Christianity, and some of our um ecumenical and multi-faith colleagues had the same experience. And so, just very practically, the ability to work with colleagues from a variety of different religious and spiritual traditions, but who centered and valued um, those who were oppressed, that had sort of an understanding of God's preferential treatment and preferential option for the poor, marginalized, and oppressed, that it was actually just practically a lot more fun to work in multi-faith and ecumenical contexts than necessarily working within our own traditions. I don't want to completely diss my beloved UCCers, for instance. Um, but I just have a I understand myself as a Christian universalist. By that, I mean that, yeah, I believe that there are many, many paths to a God who is so great and vast as the universe that we need multiple traditions and multiple expressions um, that help us understand the vastness and the awesomeness of God. Um, and mine is the Christian path. Um, but I also recognize that people who are situated either because of their social location, their racial identity, their disability status, their gender identity, like everybody has a particular orientation and perspective of God. And the more we include the variety of perspectives, the deeper and the wider the understanding of the awesomeness of the sacred in my experience.
Mm,
And even the awesomeness of the Jesus path. And so those are some of the reasons why, yeah, ecumenical and multi-faith work has always been more fun, and I think theologically more honest.
mm. Well, I know a lot of your work, just given your background that you've talked about there, how it kind of all interconnects. You have a deep passion for justice.
Amen.
And I know that I just watching you, I know you over the years, that your work in the justice arena, whether it's been environmental, whether it's been around some various insecurities, racial justice, especially given some of the things I know you guys have tackled there in Minneapolis around the Native American. So, can you talk a little bit about those, about your passion with justice for justice?
Mm. Well, and I will say it takes one to know one, Bishop Robert. Um, well, yes. I mean, I think part of um, my own history, um, I'm the daughter of two clergy people. I was raised in the church, you know, every Sunday and many Wednesdays, that kind of a Christian practice. But I had in growing up, I had a crush on Melissa Gilbert as Laura Ingalls Wilder um, on Little House on the Prairie. And in I want to say 84, Melissa Gilbert played Jean Donovan, who was one of the four U.S. churchwomen who were raped and killed in El Salvador in 1980. They were about 9 months after Archbishop Oscar Romero was assassinated. Um, and they were very much active in the kind of liberation theology movement from a Latin American perspective. And when I saw this movie, I transferred my crush on Melissa Gilbert as Laura Ingalls Wilder to my crush on Melissa Gilbert as Jean Donovan.
Uh,
So I read everything I could about her, about Archbishop Oscar Romero, and about kind of liberation theology from a Latin American perspective, and went to El Salvador in 1987 as part of an accompaniment um, uh, project, and met there some of the most um, folks for whom Christianity and their faith was necessary for their survival. Um, and in particular, um, I met a comadre, like a mother of the disappeared,
mm,
who had lost multiple children in the Civil War, one of whom she witnessed being tortured to death. And my 18-year-old self, I said, like, how did you survive that? Um, and she said to me, I know that in the person of Jesus Christ, God knows in God's body what it means to be tortured to death. And so I know that as my son was being tortured to death, Jesus was there wrapping his arms around my son.
mm,
And furthermore, I know that God resurrected Jesus, and I know that God resurrects my son.
mm,
And if anything happens to me, I know that God will be with me and will resurrect me. And that makes me fearless, and my fearlessness makes me powerful. And I was like, that was like a witness that completely shaped my adult life. I mean, it was my that moment of coming to an adult faith. And I mean, I owe my adult faith to her. And and also that experience of um this like faith being necessary for survival. Um and I have found in my life that faith and spirituality is most powerfully alive in those places where our faith is necessary for our survival. And so um, I feel like I have always been in search of where is God most present. And so I mean, some of the worship that you all do at Sunshine Cathedral, that deeply rooted in the queer liberation movement, deeply rooted in movements for racial and climate justice, and that so yeah, I have done a lot of work um, in the last 10 years or so. Um, kind of in followership of indigenous water protectors here in North Dakota. The a lot of the pipelines that they're trying to put through, um, and here in Minneapolis, we have a very powerful kind of multi-faith movement that's been in followership of the movement for Black Lives, around the murder of George Floyd, but also Jamar Clark and Philando Castile. Um, yeah, and there's been a lot of solidarity around particularly indigenous and black-led movements. And a lot of the indigenous and black folks leading those movements are queer folks.
Mhm.
And so that's been where um, a lot of my work has been, um and coming out of that, both Black and Indigenous leaders asking those of us who are white to kind of go get our cousins. And so for the last 5 years or so, I've been involved in um, trying to provide some leadership around predominantly and historically white churches doing reparation work vis-a-vis Black and Indigenous communities. So that project has been a primary project that I've been involved in with a bunch of wonderful kindred called Sacred Reckonings, white settler colonizer churches doing the work of reparations.
Well,
Yeah.
you and just for those who are watching this, if you are not familiar with anything that Dr. Voelkel is talking about, just Google this work online and you will find lots of information about a lot of the things that she's speaking about. I mean, if it were not for the cold, because of the Jesuit works that happens in Minneapolis, I would live there. But you mentioned something a minute ago. I want to kind of chase a rabbit with this a little bit. Yeah, and I'm going to paraphrase line you said. Faith is necessary for our journey. And I kind of want to like take a leap and chase a rabbit. Faith is necessary for our journey, given the national politics that we're dealing with right now, how our national politics, our current administration, not only is doing things as impacting America, but really impacting the globe. What are some of your thoughts, be it religious, spiritual, political, whichever angle you want to come at it from, about what's going on in our current administration right now and how it's impacting the least among those or those who
Mm.
on I've taken on this thing about the margins. Before this administration came into play, we knew kind of what the margins were. We kind of knew how wide the margins were. But since then, I have been keenly aware that our margins have grown a great deal. And it has grown a great deal also by people who didn't expect to find themselves in the margins.
Mm.
And so I think I'm just being very mindful about Yes, we are in the margins, and now we're having to accommodate others who didn't think that we're going to be in the margins. How are we pastoral to them? How's
Mm,
faith
mm,
play into what we're doing now? So just talk a minute, if you will, about that. Just that faith, that faith that's needed for this journey of the work that we're doing, because you're rich in that work. So I think you have some
mm.
that.
Well, I would be super interested in your answering that question as well, but I will take a shot at it. Um, well, I really the Proctor Institute had a webinar, I think it was back in July of 2024, last year. And as part, it was about Project 2025. And as part of that, Bishop Joseph Tolton did one of those, like, it was 10 minutes and it was a mic drop session that I would recommend to you. But one of the things that he said that has been extremely helpful to me was he said, Project 2025, the New Apostolic Reformation. I don't know if people are familiar with that. The Seven Mountain Mandate, um, all of this that has I feel like the Seven Mountain Mandate is the clearest piece of the belief that there are seven sort of power centers of society, and white, cisgender Christian men need to be rulers, need to be in charge of all seven of those mountains of society. And Bishop Tolton said, this these Project 2025 New Apostolic Reformation, Seven Mountain Mandate are simply a modern rearticulation of the doctrine of discovery. And so, and you know, the doctrine of discovery is this ongoing Christian understanding that in order to be human, one needs to be white and Christian and heterosexual and cisgender, um, and that there are hierarchies in creation, sort of like God, Jesus, angels, men, women, like it's sort of the rearticulation of the Augustinian hierarchies of creation. So, and I believe that that is a deep distortion of Christianity. It is I would say blasphemy and sinful. Um, and I feel like we are in this moment having this sort of upsurge and uncovering of what has always been there, but it's particularly in the limelight right now. Um, and like one of the things that I have been particularly discomfited by is there was a book a couple of years ago, and then there's a new one out. The one a couple of years ago was called Toxic Empathy.
Mhm.
And the new one that I think is coming out maybe in April, or maybe it's already come out, called The Sin of Empathy.
Yes.
But they are trying to say, I mean, like the mental gymnastics about how they do this, but they're trying to say that if you feel connection and empathy towards queer people, towards immigrants, towards, people who are seeking reproductive health care, that is Satan moving in your life, and that Jesus somehow did not practice empathy. But so, I mean, I feel like, so this moment is this sort of like upswelling and uncovering of this deeply distorted Christianity. Um, and the two things I would say about how it is that we're called to respond to that. My partner and I were at the 60th anniversary of Bloody Sunday in Selma. And it was so powerful to be reminded of, our ancestors have lived through other upsurges of the doctrine of discovery. And like those were contexts where faith was necessary for their survival. And
Mm,
so like literally what would Jesus have us do in this moment? With whom would Jesus have us make community, and for whom would Jesus have us act in the world? And so there's this like deeply um I don't like this root of like what our ancestors are praying for us and calling us toward. Um and I feel like part of that is recognizing that there is suffering and death and danger. And I don't I feel like we have to lean into that reality that this is a very scary time. And how do we find the courage to live like that Salvadoran comadre? Like that, we know that Jesus will accompany us into whatever danger we are called and will resurrect us if needs be. Yeah, and that has been really, really helpful to me. And I guess the other thing that I would just say is I have been in many, many spaces where we are sort of called back into like our coalitions and relationship. Like I think like who who are we in relationship with? Who are our kindred? Who are we, and to your point, as the marginalized community grows, how are we finding kindred um who are experiencing the same kind of marginalization, but may not be part of our primary community? Like, how are we building that web of interconnectedness very practically in terms of our coalitional politics?
mhm.
Those are the two places where my heart and brain are going.
Well, I mean, you hit on one thing. Going back to Selma, I grew up about an hour away from Selma, so all of Selma and Montgomery is rich in my in my in my DNA. And I think the thing that resonated with me when you said it, because I kind of felt it, we almost have to find that Mecca, if you will,
Mm.
that we
Mm.
can return to that reminds us of the work that we're called to do. And I can think no other better place than Selma at Pettus Bridge is a reminder of the work that we're called to do. I remember went across that bridge several times as a kid growing up, but it wasn't until I went back as an adult during the Obama administration when he was there. And I remember crossing the bridge, and it finally hit me after all those years. This is the work we're called to do, and we can't stop doing. Because as you know, as John Lewis said, the work wasn't finished when they crossed the bridge. It really was just beginning. And I think we're being reminded today that work is still ongoing and fighting for justice and fighting for the margins of those in the margins and doing it under something that we call faith and through the church.
Yeah.
I was snooping on your Facebook page earlier, and I came across that quote by Oscar Romero. I'm going to paraphrase about the pulpit and the politics of it all. And I think it kind of reminds us that we cannot allow those folks to take that away from us, saying, "Oh, we can't do church and politics. Politics don't belong to church." And my thing right now, everything that Jesus was about politics, social justice, political justice, just across the board. And so I think you're right that we are in this almost pregnant moment, if you will,
Mm.
and we're I think all the ingredients that we're putting into it from the areas of work of justice we're doing is going to birth something. But right now we're in the pain of it. And we don't know where it's going to go. But I always like to remain that thing that there is hope at the end of this, and we have to maintain that to get there. So
Amen.
yeah. So Dr. Vogel, one last question for you. For those colleagues, friends who are on this journey from around the globe, really, what would you offer as a piece of advice to them as we find ourselves struggling literally from day to day, and there's ups and downs, goods and bads, highs and lows? What would you offer them as a moment of
Mm.
encouragement, as a moment of hope? Because I know you have a deep spiritual, rich
Mm.
spiritual foundation also. And so from that spiritual richness side, what would you offer to those who are on the forefronts, who are on the battlefields, those who
Mm. Mm.
know, those who are uncertain, and those who are outright scared?
Mm. Well, I was reminded by what you were just saying, of something that's been really um, resonating with me. And that is um, kind of Indigenous and Black organizers um, have this concept of first, second, and third space. And um, I heard somebody preach on the transfiguration um, recently, and they were talking, and then I used a lot of their work. My recently preached on the transfiguration and talked about this. First space is the conditions of oppression and violence that exist in the world. Second space is the resistance and the sort of those who are warriors for justice. And third space are those moments when we, like, in Baby Suggs Holy, the clearing in Beloved, like those moments when we touch the realm of God, or we have a palpable experience of what liberation might look like. Um, and it's an opportunity. Sometimes it lasts a moment, sometimes it lasts a day, a week, a month, but that the ways in which third space enables our imagination and our dreaming and our hoping. It's sort of a, to use a fancy Christian word, a sort of like eschatological moment. Um, and it's part of the reason why we went to the 60th anniversary of Selma. It's like, I think putting ourselves and trying to create third spaces so we don't lose our joy, our imagination, um, yeah, our hope. I think about, was it Dan Savage or Andrew Sullivan? I think it was Dan Savage who recently talked about the height of the AIDS epidemic. And his quote was something like, "In the morning, we buried our dead. In the afternoon, we protested. And at night, we danced all night." And it was the dancing that kept us being able to grieve and protest. And I think that's what I mean by third space. Like, where are those spaces where we're touching that which for which we are fighting? And so I guess my advice to myself, as much as anybody else, is like, don't forget to dance and sing and touch third space and keep dreaming and hoping. Um, yeah. How would you answer that question?
Oh my gosh. Now, that's not how this works, right? When I think about that question, also, I think about we have to find and make room for ourselves on this journey. Uh,
Mm,
if it's in that third space of creating that space, because there's so much of the work that so many of us have been doing for so long that we get in that place where we're tired and oh my God, we got to do this again. And so I think we have to find that, take that moment. Don't find, just take the moment to find ways that we can be re-energized, recharge ourselves for the journey. And sometimes
mm,
that charging may take longer than other times. Uh,
mm.
we have to, I think, a part of it is being in tune with our bodies and listening to our bodies and listen to our spirits and allowing it to tell us what we need in order to keep moving with this journey. I think it might have been Eric Rofus or somebody along those lines at some time back about looking in the mirror. And there are a lot of us that look in the mirror and ask themselves, what does my body need today?
Mm,
It was doing it in relation to medication. Like it was like been in AIDS and like, what does my body, which vitamin does my body need today? What does my body need? And I have just carried that with me my lifetime. Like, look in the mirror and ask your body, what does it need? And I think
mm,
take the time to look in the mirror, and it's more about saying I love myself the way I am. It's also asking the question, what does my body need? And listening to it and finding ways to feel that in our body sustains us, that gives us hope, that renews us, because we're not in this by ourselves. We have to be in this together, and I think that's why I appreciate your strength over the years of watching how you have modeled really what it means
Mm.
to be an interfaith, interreligious, ecumenical work. And so thank you for that.
Mm. Right back at you, my friend. Deeply grateful.
Well, Dr. Voelkel, thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today on Bishop Talk. And I love working with you. I love keeping up with you. And I really appreciate the opportunity that we've had just now, and I hope others will benefit from this.
Amen.
Thank you so much.